Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon tonight on Parshas Eikev, and we're doing Os Gimel in the Zera Shimshon. In your sefer, if you have the sefer, it's Daf Shin Yud Zayin, section 3, and we're going to take a look at one pasuk from our parsha, and then we're going to begin. So the pasuk is Perek Ches pasuk Gimel, again Parshas Eikev, and it is talking about the experience of Bnei Yisrael as they traveled through the Midbar, and the pasuk says, "Vaya'ancha vayarivecha," and I afflicted you, and I made you hungry. Vaya'achilcha es haman, and I fed you the mun. Asher lo yodata, that you did not know, meaning you were not familiar with the mun before. V'lo yodun avosecha, and your fathers were not familiar with the mun. Leman hodiacha, in order to instruct you, to make you know, ki lo al halechem levado yichye ha'adam, that it is not on bread alone that a person lives, ki im al kol motzi fi Hashem yichye ha'adam, but rather it is on everything that comes out of Hashem's mouth that a person lives. So the Zera Shimshon is going to focus on that pasuk, which is again dealing with the mun that the Jews that sustained Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. So the Zera Shimshon says, Medrash Abkir. The Medrash Abkir says, Vaya'ancha vayarivecha vaya'achilcha es haman. That's of course a quote right from our pasuk. I afflicted you and I made you hungry and I fed you the mun. So the Medrash comments, Mikan remez lahadlakas neros b'Shabbos. From here, from these words, there is a hint to the mitzvah of lighting candles on Shabbos. So let's pause right here. The Zera Shimshon, usually he'll explain if he has a problem with a medrash or a pasuk or whatever. If he has a problem with any text, he asks the question. Sometimes he has several questions. Here he doesn't even ask the question because he assumes that anyone who reads that text will say, "Wait, what? What's that talking about?" Right? The Medrash quotes the pasuk of Vaya'ancha vayarivecha v'yachilcha es haman. I afflicted you, I made you hungry, I fed you the mun, and this somehow hints to the mitzvah of lighting candles on Shabbos. When obviously there doesn't seem to be any apparent connection whatsoever from that pasuk to the mitzvah of lighting candles on Shabbos. There's no obvious connection, no apparent connection whatsoever. So the Zera Shimshon doesn't waste time asking the question as what's the connection? It's right in. Ubeir inyan haman im hadlakas haneros. The explanation as to how the mun, the subject of the mun, connects to hadlakas haneros, yuvan b'medrash rabbah. It can be understood by taking a look at another medrash this is the medrash rabbah from Koheles. Al pasuk biruvos hatova rabu ochleha. This is a pasuk in the 5th parak in Koheles, and that pasuk begins with these words: biruvos hatova, the increase of good that a person might have. Rabu ochleha. There will be a corresponding increase to the amount of people who are there to consume the good that the person has received. So imagine if the good we're talking about might be the good of food, of crops. The more crops that a person has, Shlomo Melech is saying it says in that pasuk in Koheles, the more people are going to come to eat the food. So there's no real benefit to the person who had the increase. The more food, the more benefit they receive, the more people come to consume that benefit. So based on that, based on that pasuk in Koheles, the Medrash Rabbah says, Shalom leMenachem. They asked Menachem from a different pasuk, actually from our pasuk, v'chule, etc. Mahu dein dichsiv. What does it mean? This that is written, Vaya'ancha vayarivecha vaya'achilcha es haman. What is the meaning of our pasuk that says God afflicted you and He made you hungry and He fed you the mun? Right? What is the meaning of that pasuk? V'chi ma'achal ra'avon nasan lahem hakadosh baruch hu liyisrael es haman. Did Hashem intend to make the Jews feel hungry when He gave them the mun? Right? We know ourselves from a very young age when we learned the mun that it was a miraculous food, and it was amazing. It could taste like anything that you wanted it to taste like. and it sustained Bnei Yisrael. It was an incredible, miraculous gift to sustain Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. So they asked the question, did Hashem really want to make the people hungry and afflict them and punish them by giving them the man? Is that really what the pasuk is saying? Ma'asa, what did he do to answer this question? Hevi lifnehem shtei kishuin. He brought in front of them two zucchinis or two squash. Achash shlema, one of them was whole and complete, va'achash shavura, and one of them was broken. However, they were the same size. So picture, if we want to go with zucchini, picture a zucchini, two next to each other, they're the same size. One just happens to be whole and complete, and one was larger and a piece broke off, and now they're the same size. But one's full and complete and one's broken. Omar, he said, Hadosh le'mosa hi bekama. He said, this whole zucchini or this whole squash, how much would it go for in the market? Amrule, they said to him, betrain manin. It would go for 2 mana. That's how much it would cost. V'hados sevira bekama, and this broken squash or zucchini, how much would it go for? Amarle bechad mana. So he said to him, it would go for 1 mana, half the price of the whole one. Amarle, so Menachem said to him, V'chi ein hashvura gedola kamo hashlema. Isn't the broken one just as big, just as large? Let's say they both weigh a quarter of a pound or with the same amount of ounces. They're the same size. So why should it be half price? Amar Le said to him, Lo dome. He said, there's no comparison between the two. Kishem she'adam nene min hatam, just like a person enjoys the flavor, the taste of food, kachu nene min hara'iyah. So too he enjoys and benefits from the appearance of the food. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Medrash Rabbah on Koheles. So let's just understand the answer and what happened over there, right? It was determined that the complete vegetable would cost twice as much as the broken vegetable, even though they were the same size and the same weight. And the answer that was given was, yes, it's true, I could have as much food, as much taste, and as much as I can eat if I buy either one, but with one of them I have the hana, I have the pleasure and the enjoyment of knowing I'm getting a whole beautiful vegetable, and with the other one I see a broken vegetable, and that's significantly less pleasure and enjoyment from the visual perspective, from what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing. So now the Zera Shimshon is going to show how that medrash and the Koheles Rabbah helps us understand our medrash Abakir. The imkain bisman shelo hayu roim ella hamon. If so, now we understand that when the Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, when they used to look at the food they were given, and they would see the man, they would only see the appearance of the man, v'haya mishtana lekamatamim, and it could change to many other flavors, but the appearance never changed. The appearance was always the same. Nikra inoy v'ra'avon. This is why it was called an affliction and a hunger. It created a hunger. Meaning the people who had the man, even though it could taste like whatever they wanted, they were only receiving ta'am, but they weren't receiving ra'iyah. They weren't receiving this pleasure that we're now learning, that we learned from the Midrash Shirav and Koheles, is such an important part of the enjoyment of the eating of the experience. They didn't have that. The man looked exactly the same, and the Torah tells us it looked like a white seed, and so it always looked like that. So they were tasting all kinds of wonderful things in terms of their tam, their taste, but the appearance never changed. As the Gemara says in the 8th parak of Maseches Yuma, Eino dome misha yeshlo pas bisalo lemisha einlo. It is not similar. You can't compare someone who has bread in his basket to someone who has no bread. We'll explain in a moment what the Gemara is talking about. Ve'eno dome misha roa ve'ochel lemisha eno roa ve'ochel. And you can't compare someone who is able to see the food that he or she is eating to someone else who is not able to see the food that he or she is eating. So this is a very important Gemara for our discussion about the mun, because what happens over there is the Gemara asks the question as to why the mun. Why would the mun ever be considered a negative experience? And so the Gemara brings Rav Ami v'Rebbi Asi. It doesn't say, and they have a machlokas. They have two different answers. Doesn't say who says which opinion, which commonly happens. with Rav Ami and Rabbi Asi, but it tells us one of them said the reason why is because when they received the mun, the mitzvah was to eat the mun on that day. You were not allowed. There was a lo saseh. There was a prohibition in the Torah to save over from the mun for a specific day to eat it the next day, unless, of course, it was Friday when a double portion fell, a lechem mishnah fell, and you would save a portion for the next day. But on any other day of the week, when it's not Friday and Shabbos, you were prohibited from saving food over for the next day. So you ate all of the mun you received that day, and then you had nothing left for the next day. That person, the Gemara refers to as someone who has no pas basalo. He has no bread in his basket. The Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, were used to all of the time they lived before they came to the Midbar and started receiving the mun. They were used to always saving from whatever food they had for the next day. They would never leave themselves with absolutely no food for the next day. That's called pas basalo. People who have bread in their basket, meaning they have food for the next day. So the first answer to the question as to why the mun was problematic and challenging and a negative experience for Bnei Yisrael, the first answer is because they ate all of it in one day. That was the mitzvah. Then they had nothing left for the next day, and so they had a feeling of insecurity. They had a feeling of wondering and is the mun really going to fall? Am I going to have enough food for the next day? As opposed to their normal experience, which was they could control the amount of food. They could control the quantity of food that they ate on one day to make sure that they had that sense of security when they went to sleep, that they would have food for the next day. But with the mun, you could not do that. You were not allowed to do that. That's the first opinion. The second opinion, the one that's most relevant to our discussion, is Eino Doma Misha Roa V'Ochel. The reason the mun was a problem is because normally you get to see and look at what you're eating, and you get the visual pleasure as well as the pleasure of eating the food and the taste of the food. And that's not what happened with the mun, which they could eat, but they could not see. And the Gemara continues, Shahasumin Ochlim Ve'enom Seveim. The Gemara brings Rav Yosef's statement, and Rav Yosef was a blind man. We know from many other places in Shas. And he says, blind people eat, but they are never fully satiated. They're never fully satiated because they can't see the food. So a blind person can eat the same exact plate of food, nice big meal that another person, a sighted person, is eating, and the sighted person will be fully satisfied and satiated, and the blind person will not be equally satiated, because he or she is not able to see the food and to get that important hana, that important benefit and pleasure of seeing the food. Ulefizeh. And according to this, that we now understand how the mun was missing the re'iyah, the benefit of seeing the food. The mun didn't give you that pleasure and benefit. It didn't give it to Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. So now, according to that, hoil she'asar lanu lehisanos b'Shabbos. Since we are forbidden to fast on Shabbos, and just the opposite, we have a mitzvah. Not only can we not fast on Shabbos, it's a specific mitzvah to eat 3 seudos. According to another opinion, there's 4 seudos we're obligated to eat, but certainly at least 3, and one of them should take place on Friday night. The likros l'Shabbos oneg, and based on a pasuk in Navi, we know we're supposed to call Shabbos oneg, an enjoyment. We're supposed to do what we need to do to prepare and make Shabbos very pleasurable and enjoyable. Mishum hachi tzrichen anu lahadlik neros b'Shabbos. So therefore we see the connection to the mitzvah to light candles on Shabbos, kedei shelo yehei sham, in order that there shouldn't be there, meaning on Shabbos, shem inoy v'ra'avon, any name, that any characterization or description on Shabbos of our experiences as something that is inoy, is suffering, v'ra'avon, and hunger. So let's pause here. The Zera Shimshon brought this Medrash Abkir, in which the pasuk about the mun was connected, about the suffering involved or the hunger involved of the mun experience was connected to lighting the candles on Shabbos. And he was able to show us, based on a Medrash Rabbah in Koheles and based on a Gemara in Maseches Yuma, he was able to show us and demonstrate for us that there's a concept of re'iyah, of enjoying food through the visual experience, seeing it and looking at the food, and that's very important, not just a minor factor. It's extremely important to the degree that a blind person, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yosef says in that Gemara in Yuma, never feels full satiation or full satisfaction from his or her meal. And because of that, we see the connection. Now we understand that we can learn that, of course, we have to have candles at our meal on Friday night, when it would, without the candles, without the Ner Shabbos, it would be dark, right? There'd be no light in the house. It would be dark. It's nighttime, and we wouldn't see the food, and that would be considered a type of suffering and a type of hunger-causing experience, which we cannot allow on Shabbos when we have a mitzvah to enjoy to the best of our abilities the experiences that we have and the food that we eat on Shabbos. So the connection is clear. V'zehu she'omar, and this that the Medrash said, mita ka'omar kra, from the fact that the pasuk said, vaya'ancha vayarivecha vaya'achilcha es hamon mikan remes lahadnokos neros b'Shabbos, the fact that it quoted the pasuk, and it said, from here we see a hint for lighting candles, kidei sheyu sham kol ha'hanos. It's teaching us that on Shabbos we have to have all of the pleasure in terms of our meal. Hanos hatam v'hanos hara'iyah. Both the pleasure of the taste of the food and the pleasure of seeing the food. V'zehu v'karasa l'Shabbos oneg. And this, the Zera Shimshon says, is the real meaning of why it says you should call. We have to be very careful with the words here. You should call Shabbos an enjoyable experience. Shahadavar toloi biyad ha'adam. The pasuk is teaching us it's up to us, it's up to each individual Jewish person to make sure that Shabbos is an enjoyable experience, and to make sure it can be called and referred to as an enjoyable experience. L'kroso oneg, to call it enjoyable. Va'af la'achar sheziman hama'acholim, even after the delicious foods are prepared, lo sagi, this would not be sufficient. Im lo yikra'enu oneg, if it's not called enjoyable, fully enjoyable, dahainu behadlakas haneros, and this means through the lighting of the candles. So the Zera Shimshon has gone into detail here to explain for us that connection between the mun and why it was considered a real problem for some of the members of Bnei Yisrael because they couldn't see the food, and why that teaches us on Shabbos we have to go to the nth degree to make sure that we prepare the most delicious foods, serve the most delicious foods, and make sure our room that we're eating in is very well lit by our beautiful Shabbos candles that help everyone see the food and enjoy it. That concludes the first half of the Zera Shimshon piece, and now he's going to explain. He's going to add a new dimension and a new perspective on this issue of the mun and our meals on Shabbos. The bottom of the column. V'od b'derech acher, and also in addition, in a different way of looking at this question, yesh lomar, we can say, de'issa b'meforshim. It states in the commentators, hatam shenasan hakadosh baruch hu, the reason that Hashem gave Yisrael to Bnei Yisrael Haman derech inoi v'ra'avon. Why did Hashem give Bnei Yisrael mun with this negative aspect, with this challenging and problematic issue of feeling afflicted and hunger because they couldn't see the mun? Why, after all, did Hashem do that, right? Everything we said so far doesn't answer the why question. Why would Hashem do that? Why give them a food that caused them to have this problem? Hainu lefisha hamon hayamazon ruchani. This was because mun was a spiritual food. It was unlike any other item or object of food that human beings would ever eat or have ever eaten. It was a spiritual food. V'lo gufani, it was not a physical food. V'efshar lehanos ba'olam hazeh mishum davar ruchani. And it's impossible in this very materialistic physical world to fully benefit from something that is spiritual. Ubiprat hana gufanis, and specifically if you're talking about a physical pleasure, kemozu shahayalo l'shamish lemozon ha'adam. For example, here in our case of the mun, which was intended to serve as food for people. Well, that's a very physical experience with the taste buds and the sensory. All of the different senses are involved in that. And so if you have a spiritual food, a spiritual object like the mun, and you want a person to have physical pleasure from it, that's a very hard thing to do. That's actually, he says, efshar. That's an impossible thing to really do. And because of this, Hashem gave them the man in a way that caused them suffering and feeling pangs of hunger pangs. Because Hashem knew and did not want them to have a full pleasure from a spiritual food. Rak hanoah chasera. He only wanted them to have an incomplete pleasure from it. Kemo shehem kol tovos ha'olam hazeh. Just as is true by all spiritual benefits in this world, she'enam hanoah shlema. They do not give a person who receives them full pleasure and full benefit. Of course, what's not stated here, but is completely understood and is manifest, is that only in Olam Haba, only in a world which is a spiritual world, can a person do people completely benefit and completely enjoy the spiritual rewards that Hashem saves for us and sets aside for us. But in this world, a person can never get complete hana from a spiritual reward, and therefore, when Hashem bestowed the man upon Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, it was a given, so to speak. It was understood that there's no way Bnei Yisrael could completely enjoy this spiritual food, this unique, miraculous spiritual food, and therefore it came with a hana chasera, an incomplete joy, and they didn't have the full benefit that they were used to eating regular food that all of us are used to eating, similar to the foods that we eat all the time. So the Zera Shimshon continues. That food that we today, he's shifting gears to talk about us nowadays, that we eat on Shabbos, hu mazon gufani. It is physical food, whatever we're eating, chicken soup, matzah ball soup, cholent, kugel, whatever we're eating on Shabbos, it's of course physical food. V'chashiv lanu kamo mazon ruchani. However, the Zera Shimshon is teaching us this food is considered like spiritual food. It's not spiritual food, it's completely physical, but it is considered like a spiritual food. Shahari Kosov Hareshis Chachma, because look at what the Reshis Chachma wrote. Shekol habosar v'hashumon hamisrabe ba'adam. All of the flesh and fat that develops on a person, that grows on a person, bishvil achilo Shabbos v'yom tov, because of the food that people eat on Shabbos and Yom Tov, eino nepach l'rimo v'soleya. It does not turn after a person dies into worms as does the rest of the person's flesh. So the Reshus Chochmah is saying that after a person dies and a person's body decomposes, that part of the person's body that develops specifically from the food that the person ate on Shabbos and Yom Tov is not susceptible to being consumed by worms. Why is this significant? So he'll tell us. And about this fact that food, that part of the person's body doesn't turn to worms, doesn't produce worms, it states in Tehillim about this, Af bisari yishkon laveta. Even my flesh, David HaMelech says, will dwell in safety, or will dwell in security. So according to the Zera Shimshon's interpretation of those words in that pasuk, it means that a person's flesh after they die will, not only when they're alive, but even after they die, will be secure in this sense that it won't be susceptible to that kind of decomposition. And if so, if the meals that we eat on Shabbos are considered to be like spiritual food, and they're different, we distinguish between them and all of the other food that we consume the rest of the week, we say the food that we eat on Shabbos and Yom Tov is unique and special and considered like a spiritual type of consumption. So therefore, it should be eaten without any suffering or hunger connected to it. V'hainu la'ochlo b'neros dolkos, and therefore we eat it with candles burning, kedei shetehei kedei sevia, in order that we should be fully satisfied, both in terms of ta'am, taste, and in terms of ra'iyah, in terms of seeing the food. Shahari zos hasvia hi svia ruchanis, because this satisfaction represents a full spiritual satisfaction. Shahari eino ne'afeches l'rima v'solea, because as we said, as the Reishis Chochmah said, the part of the person's body that kind of corresponds to that food eaten on Shabbos and Yontif is not susceptible. V'litein bo simon shel svia ruchanis shehi kula ora. And here in a beautiful thought, the Zera Shimshon adds, and the sign for this fact that the meals that we eat and the food we eat on Shabbos and Yontif is unique and considered like a spiritual eating is to have candlelight there. He says, not just to see the food, but to symbolize spirituality, which is represented by light. So the Zera Shimshon teaches us such a beautiful idea here that when we light our Shabbos candles or we sit down at the table and the Shabbos candles are there at the table, we should definitely not overlook them in any way. We should think to ourselves, first of all, the lights are here so that we can see our food, because Hashem wants us to fully and completely enjoy our food on Shabbos. And we should also think, in addition to that, that the light from the candles represents spirituality, ruchnius, and that the food, the meal that we're eating on Shabbos is a spiritual meal. It's not just a nice meal. It's not just a delicious meal. It's not just a satisfying meal. It's nechshav, it's considered as if it's a spiritual meal. And that's what the light of the Nero Shabbos, of the Shabbos candles, symbolizes. The Zera Shimshon continues. V'zehu de'isa b'yalkut, and this idea can also be seen in the Yalkut Shimoni. Al pasuk b'haloscha es haneros, on the pasuk of talking about in Parshas Ba'aloscha about raising up the lights on the menorah. So the Yalkut Shimoni says, Kavod HaShabbos heim neiroseha. The honor of Shabbos is through its candles. It's through its burning lights, its candles. Ubischuson, and through the merit of the Shabbos candles, ani mare lachem nero shel Tzion. I will show you the ultimate lights of Tzion. V'ani b'chvodi meir lachem, and I myself in my glory will provide illumination for you, meaning in the future, in the time of the geula, of the redemption. K'dichsiv lo yeh lecha od hashemesh, as the pasuk says, it will not just be the sun. It won't be the sun that will provide illumination. V'haya lecha Hashem le'or olam. It will be Hashem providing light for the world through His illumination. V'chol kach lama, and all of this, why do we deserve such an incredible experience? How can we possibly merit such an incredible experience as receiving light from Hashem Himself? It's the merit of the candles that we light on Shabbos, Ad Kan Lashono. Until here is a quote from the Yalkut Shimoni. So the Zera Shimshon is strengthening and adding to this beautiful point that he's developed about the incredible importance of Nero Shabbos and what they provide for us, both from the enjoyment of our meal and from the spirituality of our meal, and what they symbolize for the future. They actually are a symbol of the Geula, when Hashem will provide illumination for the world. Bottom of the column. And this is the full explanation of our medrash that we started with. Sheme'oso tam atzmo, from the very same reason shenosan lahem hamon, that Hashem gave them the mon shehu ruchani, which is a spiritual food, the inoy v'ra'avon. Hashem gave the Jewish people the man in the midbar through a process, or in a way, in such a way that it caused them suffering and hunger. Kedei she'iyah bo kitzas gufnius, in order that it should have some aspect of physicality, v'chisaron, and that it should be missing something, kedei she'yuchal lehiskashem, in order that it could take physical form, right? So he's saying, if Hashem hadn't changed the man in any way, and had left it as a purely spiritual food, then Bnei Yisrael never could have physically picked it up and eaten it, and it wouldn't have done anything for them in this physical world. So Hashem had to change the mun, had to adapt the mun and give it a physicality, which made it possible to serve its purpose, v'liyos mazon, so that it could be a food la'adam gufani, for physical people. Mishum hachi me'oso tam atzmo, from that very same reason as to why Hashem had to had to treat the mun this way and make it a kind of experience for Bnei Israel in the Midbar that they couldn't fully enjoy. From that very same idea, that's why we light candles for the Friday night meal. Kedei lirmos leruchnius ofen hamazon hagishmi, in order to hint to the spirituality of the food, of the physical food that we eat at Shabbos meal. She'enu mishapech l'rima v'solah, as we said, as the Reishis Chachma taught us, it doesn't turn into worms. V'zeu kavod gadol l'Shabbos, and this is a great honor for Shabbos. Shebezeh anu romzim she'osa achila. Through this, we are hinting, through having our Shabbos candles burning, we're hinting to the food. Ilonu kemo achila ruchanit. It is like a spiritual meal, a spiritual eating. And as we've said, it's important to internalize that message and think of that when we sit down to our Shabbos and Yom Tov table. The Asi Shapir here, the Zera Shimshon concludes with one more source to bring in, to continue supporting his idea. The Asi Shapir, and now we can understand beautifully what it Masha Amru Zichronim Levracha, what Chazal say in Maseches Pesachim, Ein Kiddush Ela B'Makom Seuda, very famous Chazal. There is no Kiddush unless it is in the place of the meal, and we think of that in the halachic sense, meaning that you have to have Kiddush where you eat the meal. You can't just make Kiddush and then not eat any food and go somewhere else and have a meal. Kiddush has to be connected to eating food. Lefisha Seuda Zu Kiddusha V'Ruchnius Yeshba. And the reason why that's true, that Kiddush has to connect to your meal, is because of what the Zera Shimshon has been teaching us, that a Shabbos meal has a tremendous Kedusha, a holiness, and a spirituality to it. V'lachein tzarich lasos Kiddush kodem achila. And that's why you have to make Kiddush, a sanctification, recitation of Kiddush, of saying how holy Shabbos is. In order to hint to us again how holy a Shabbos meal is. V'nicha shapir, and it is now understood clearly shekarohu Kiddush, why Chazal called what we say on Friday night Kiddush, v'lo zechira, and they didn't call it zechira. Zechira means mentioning, and Kiddush means making holy or sanctifying. Afal gav de nafkalon mikra de zochres yom HaShabbos. Even though the mitzvah of Kiddush is learned out from the word zochor es yom HaShabbos, to remember that it's Shabbos, meaning to mention that it's Shabbos, and Chazal say on that pasuk, Zachrehu al hayayin b'chnisaso. This tells us there's a mitzvah to mention the fact that it's Shabbos over a cup of wine when Shabbos comes in. So the Zera Shimshon here is answering a question that most of us might even never thought of and never knew existed. And his question is, how come Kiddush is called Kiddush? Why isn't it called Zechira? Since the pasuk that Kiddush, that Chazal tell us the mitzvah of making Kiddush at the meal comes from, it uses the word Zochor, Zochor, Yom Shabbos, and as he quoted, Zachrehu al hayayin, Chazal say that means to mention Shabbos when it comes in, when it enters over a glass of wine, which is exactly what we do at the meal, right before the meal on Friday night. So how come it isn't called Zechira? We should say, let's all make Zechira. We're going to make Zechira now. We're going to do Zechira now. No, it's called Kiddush. Why? Why did Chazal give it the name Kiddush? So the Zera Shimshon says it's all part of this same concept, the same theme that he's developed, which is that a Shabbos meal and a Yom Tov meal have a kedusha, have a holiness and a ruchnius and a spirituality that is extremely important, and that's why we call it Kiddush when we make the bracha over wine, whether a Shabbos is coming in or a Yom Tov is coming in, and it reflects on the kedusha, the great holiness of the meal, and brings together and ties in all of the different makoros that the Zera Shimshon has brought for us and shown us how they fit together to develop this theme. Yasher koach to everyone for participating, and